Good morning. Welcome to the first UU. My name is Veronica. My pronouns are she, they. I'm a 20-something-year-old woman with a gray t-shirt, and on the back of it, it says, I'm okay. Everything is okay. It's all fine. And it is a cat that looks like it stuck its paw in an electrical outlet. So that's like my favorite thing in the world right now. I have brown hair that goes down to probably about the middle of my back. Right now it's up in a very messy bun. Let us begin by acknowledging that we gathered on the traditional territory of the Neo-Kanska people, sometimes known as the Osage. The descendants of the people who were forcibly removed from this land by colonists make up the Osage Nation. We acknowledge their continued struggle for justice. Basically.
Our chalice lighter in the sanctuary this morning is Rick. Our chalice lighting words are A Symbol of Learning and Love by Elizabeth Harding. We Unitarian Universalists don't drink from our chalice. Instead, we use it to hold the flame. The circles of the chalice helps keep the fire small, and the flame does not blind us. It does not burn us. It gives us light so we can see all the different things in the universe, even the invisible ones, because the Unitarian Universalist flame is a light of learning. The flaming chalice is a symbol of learning and of love, and it is our symbol, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism.
Our opening words are from Jennifer Glothin, who writes, as the first hint of green begins to peek through the barren ground, as that little sprig grows into a healthy stem, as that stem grows into a stalk and forms a bud, as that bud slowly opens with each new day to form a yellow daffodil. Let us be like that first hint of green, renewed by the warmth of the sun's rays and ready to emerge with a new energy, ready to face the day. In our whole worship services, we will be taking one song or hymn and leaning into learning it as a community over a month. This helps the whole community, not just the choir, become immersed in and learn music. For March, we will be learning the song, Love Will Guide Us. It's number 131 in the gray hymnals, if you prefer, or the words will be on the screens. I invite you now to rise in body or spirit to sing.
The moment of perspective is missing from the script. Hold on. We could wing it, but part of it I could not wing. So, hello, my name is AJ Fox. I use she and they pronouns. I am wearing a blue flowery dress and Doc Martens, and I have a pal with me who has a crown on, as always. I am the director of religious education here at First UU. Hold on. Yes. The theme for this month is the gift of transformation. And today we're going to continue exploring transformation, partially by thinking about the Hindu holiday Holi, a spring festival that is widely celebrated in India and other parts of the world. Holi is known as a festival of colors. Each week when we gather in whole worship together upstairs, we then go downstairs and many of us gather and do small group work that supports the stuff we just talked about upstairs. Today, the adults are going to be meeting and talking soulful home, caregiving and parenting. The kids and the youth are going to be working on mood boards for spring that take inspiration from Holi. And so I wanted to share with you the colors because it turns out all those colors mean different things in that holiday tradition, right? So I wanted to name the colors and then name the things that those colors mean. So when you see red in the holiday, it means love and attraction. When you see green, it means life, rebirth, and nature. When you see blue, it means the divine and the serene. When you see pink, it can mean care and compassion. Orange can mean spirituality and spiritual journey. Purple can be luxury and ambition. Brown can be stability, reliability, and resilience. And white can be purity and peace. So downstairs, when we're meeting after this, we'll go through all those colors, talk about them, and then use a lot of like spring stickers and collage, because why wouldn't we, to talk about that and have something to take home to think about. All right. From there, I'm going to say, please join us downstairs following service, but wait and have your coffee and your tea and your snacks and your social before you jump downstairs. All right. Nope, not right now. Thank you. Thank you, friends. And next up, we have Michelle, who hopefully has a script with her message.
Maybe I'll give this back.
Thank you.
Good morning. I am Reverend Michelle Scott-Huffman. My pronouns are she, her. I am the minister here, and I am a kind of average height woman with pale skin and short spiky hair that's shorter than sometimes because I just got a haircut this week, which means it's grayer than sometimes. I don't understand how that works. Yeah, so I'm wearing navy pants and a stripy kind of blues and greens and grays sweater today. And I'm happy to be here with you. With deep fondness for the practices and celebrations that formed her, Kalpana Jain writes, "The arrival of spring always brings sweet memories from my childhood in India of Holi." Some people pronounce it Holi. My Indian friends tried to teach me how to say it in the way they say it, which is kind of a silent H, so it's like Oli kind of thing. So anyway, you can say it however it works for you to say it today. The sound of drum beats and people dancing merrily in the streets, bodies smeared with a multitude of colors. In our home, buckets filled with wet colors would be kept ready to be poured on friends, family, and neighbors who would walk in with their own fistfuls of color. The visitors were served freshly prepared sweets and savories from my mother's kitchen, along with a delightful almond drink suffused with saffron. Jane goes on to describe Holi, saying, traditionally celebrated on the last full moon in the lunar month of Falguna, which falls this year on yesterday, the 23rd. Holi commemorates the triumph of good over evil. In Hindu mythology, the demon king Hiranyakashipu, I can't say that also, commands his subjects to acknowledge him as the supreme god. But his son, Prahalada, a devotee of the god Vishnu, refuses. In a rage, Hiranyakashipu gives his sister Holika a protective cloak and instructs her to take Prahalada in her lap and sit on a burning pyre. As Prahalada chants Vishnu's name, the cloak flies off Holika and wraps around him. Holika is charred to death while Prahalada remains unharmed. In different regions in India, it comes with different rituals and meanings. Some light a bonfire on the evening before, while elsewhere Holi is a celebration of love, honoring the divine love of Lord Krishna and Radha. With its fun and brightness, the festival has long since become a secular celebration, not unlike the West's Christmas. As far back as there are humans, there are stories and myths. Myths of origin, creation stories, etiologies, or stories that assign causes for some phenomenon that has been experienced, real or perceived. We have myths that connect us to religious and spiritual ideas. Myths within our families of journey, growth, and accomplishment. Myths in our communities of gathering and persevering together. All of it as an attempt at meaning making. Terry Creedon says that humans are meaning making machines. We love to, and it seems that we need to, draw connections that help us make sense out of things. And depending on the influences in our lives, cultural, geographic, familial, educational, economic, and religious, we will likely derive different meanings from others of the same experience or the same place, the same reading, whatever it is. If there are more than one person experiencing a thing, it's likely that the experience is being interpreted differently. This is obviously true when it comes to those big existential questions. Where and how did all of this human life begin? What's the point of it all? What comes next? What comes after this life? And how do we best live together in community? For some people, the world's religions offer answers, or at least a framework to begin making sense of those questions. Religion, in my opinion, done best, is asking better and better questions and never thinking that you actually know the answers. Years ago, I picked up a book at a library sale that seemed to call out to me. It was called Other People's Myths, and it's by Wendy Doniger O'Flaherty. And she talks about the power of some of the oldest and most intricate myths in human meaning making, and how the most important engagement with a myth is to study what the myth does and not what the myth is. Rather, she writes, myths do not merely tell us of encounters with strangers, they are themselves, on a plane once removed, such encounters for us. Through this methodological struggle with myths, we can raise certain basic questions of human meaning. What do we learn from the stories that human beings have told about strangers, animals, gods, and children. We may learn a lot about others and about myths from our own myths about others. I'm going to say that again. Our own myths about others, the stories that we have told ourselves about someone else whose experience we don't actually know and whose story we can't tell accurately, but the story that we have made up in our head. And we may learn even more about others by studying their stories about themselves and their stories about others. But we also learn things about ourselves by studying these stories. For as we progress, we may find that we are among the others in other people's myths. There is a certain self-centeredness that struggles to imagine ourselves as other in anyone else's myth, is there not? Even for those of us who swim in otherness every day, in so many aspects of our lives, we tend to think that at least some parts of our experience are just normative. We had some fun conversation in UU Connections this week about maps and how a printed map in different places of the world will look different because the place where it was printed will be shown as the center of the map. And that's not just a printing process, right? The way that we see the other world out of necessity is from the place where we are. And so we tend to think of our own experience as the normative one and struggle to imagine ourselves as the other. But the challenge lies not just in recognizing that we are the other in someone else's story, but also recognizing our own myths about others. I've always found interesting the things that we uphold as truth and the things that are quite similar that we find to be blatantly false. Like ancient creation stories that are strikingly similar across different cultures and places and times, clearly borrowed from one another and shared with these grand themes. And adherents of one religion looking at all others and saying, those stories are clearly false. But this one, that is strikingly similar, from the tradition that I have been taught and have believed, is clearly true. It also shows up in our sense of deep difference from those whose beliefs are only slightly different from ours in the grand scheme of religious and ideological difference. So one Sunday morning, I found myself with a free morning. I wasn't speaking anywhere, and I thought I can really get some stuff done here. So some of you know that during the week, part of the time, I am a campus minister for a progressive ministry that is connected with 5 mainline Protestant denominations. So part of what I do is connect with churches in those denominations. And so I had this free Sunday and I was like, oh, I could, if I worked it right, go to 2 different services this morning. And so I started out in a Lutheran church, ELCA Lutherans, the more liberal ones. And I was in this church service and went through the whole service and was sitting next to a very nice couple. And as I started to get up and leave at the end of the service, one of them said to me, oh, can you stay for coffee? And I said, sure, I can stay for a little bit, but I can't stay for long because I need to get to another church service. And they were like, oh, where are you going after this? And I said, I'm going to, X church that's a part of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. And they were like, oh. Well, that's interesting. And I was like, yeah, okay. And so I went downstairs and had a little, coffee time and went across town to this other church. And I get there a few minutes before the service and people are talking about what they've been doing this morning. And I said, oh, I just came from this Lutheran church over there. And everybody just stopped. And they looked at me and they said, well, that must have been interesting. I was like, yeah, And it occurred to me on that day that both of those people in those places thought that their experience on Sunday morning was so vastly different from one another. And I didn't want to, burst their bubble by saying the services were almost identical. I mean, disciples have some issues with words like confession, so we don't say those words in our services, right? And the ways that we practice, the sacrament of communion differs a little bit, but otherwise, I mean, we're all mainline progressive Protestants in the same religion, right? So that's tricky. Speaking of myths about others, one of my favorite interactions that highlight this reality outside of the realm of people who experience one religion differently is an experience that I had at the Interfaith Alliance of the Ozarks, which is a wonderful group that you should get connected with if you're interested in such things. The Interfaith Alliance has always been pretty heavily Christian, where that is often true in interfaith conversations. They are unfortunately often dominated by Christians, hosted by Christians, and struggle to sort of get outside that realm. So our Interfaith Alliance of the Ozarks is not much different from that. There's an abundance of Christians compared to everyone else. But then the next sort of group of people that are a majority would be people from the Abrahamic religions. So Judaism, Christianity, Islam, right? And then we sprinkle in here and there some Baha'is and a Buddhist and, a Unitarian Universalist. So this particular meeting is taking place at a church across town. And it was clear to me when I walked in that there was this weird tension in the room. I wasn't really sure what was going on, but I thought something is afoot here. And there was a new person who came in about that time. I hadn't seen them before. And the leader of the group, who was Christian, said, well, we have a new visitor with us here today, and I just wanted to introduce him. He's a leader in the local pagan community, right? And so he says, clearly sort of owning his own discomfort and that of a few people in the room, he says, why don't you introduce yourself and kind of tell us about your faith or religion, whatever you want to call it, and your own practice. And so this guy who really got my respect immediately says, well, we all have kind of individual practices, and sometimes we come together for ritual, and we don't do sacrifices and we don't drink blood. But some of you do that, don't you? Clearly, he was referring to the practice of communion, where some Christians believe in the doctrine of transubstantiation, which says that when the elements of communion are blessed, they become literally the body and blood of Christ. And so I've been a fan of his ever since. Yeah. So the other story I want to share from my own experience of this sort of othering and acting and speaking out of our ignorance was when some horrible act of violence had happened, and the person who did the act of violence happened to be Muslim. And what I saw on social media from people that I loved and respected were horrible comments about a connection between Islam and terrorism. And there was one that caught me by surprise. It was someone who's not Christian, so they're not coming out of that kind of framework. He is a pretty liberal guy, and I had thought, was the kind of person who really kind of checks things out and gets to know people. And he started to say, well, clearly there is this connection between Islam and terrorism that you can't really separate, because if not, more people who are Muslim would be denouncing the thing that happened and speaking out about it. And I was just shocked, right? And I answered him and I said, how many Muslims are you listening to right now? Like who would you hear that from if you're not in conversation with anyone who is from the faith tradition that you are assuming is wrong and bad and violent. And that's a little bit of the point of this kind of conversation today, is that we are naturally sort of sitting in our own ignorance until we have some experience or some learning, until we put ourselves in a place to learn something different, particularly if what we've been taught is those kind of negative ideas about people of other religious traditions. And so the Soul Matters sub-theme this week is transforming ignorance into knowledge. Most of us are not going to do a deep dive into any religion that is not our own, to gain the knowledge necessary to speak about it in any kind of educated and definitive terms. But what we can do is what interfaith leaders call gaining appreciative knowledge about religions that are not our own. Appreciative knowledge, according to Interfaith America founder Eboo Patel, is actively seeking out the beautiful, the admirable, and the life-giving, rather than the deficits, the problems, and the ugliness. It's an orientation that does not take its knowledge about other religions primarily from the evening news, recognizing that by definition, the evening news reports only the bad stuff, but by being attuned to the inspiring dimensions of other religious traditions, which then allows us to contextualize those ugly things that happen. So my basketball coach in high school used to say, he was a very kind man. Anytime he would ask a question and we would say, I don't know, he would say, the things you don't know could fill an encyclopedia. I mean, I imagine that's true of everyone, and the actual reason for the existence or former existence of encyclopedias, right? And I think the problem is never that there are things that we just don't know, but that often I don't know what I don't know. And I believe that I already know everything that I need to know. Diana Eck, the founder and director of the Pluralism Project at Harvard, holds out hope that we might create a truly pluralist American society in which our great religious diversity is not simply tolerated, but becomes the very source of our strength. I imagine a day when we really can come together again with people of different ideologies, people of different religious traditions, and work together for a common good. Because we don't get tripped up on the little things that divide us, but because we appreciate the difference in one another. We learn from that difference, helping other people's faithfulness to make us faithful in whatever that means for us. And that we can come together and transform this world into the best place that it can be. That is my hope. I'll close with this quote from the great Sufi poet Rumi. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I will meet you there. May it be so.